homepage overview, and navigating the EMR. In a previous video, we discussed how different medics types may have a different theme as to the user interface. With regards to the presentation of the data, however, the overall structure of the homepage is the same for all users, as is navigating the EMR itself. So that is what we're going to cover in this specific video. Across the top of the page, in the upper left, will be the clinic name and logo, as well as a welcome. And that will state the user's name, and that will remain static throughout the entire duration of that specific session. That way that you will always know who is logged in to that specific session on that specific computer. This is very advantageous in scenarios where you have multiple users requiring use of the same machine. For instance, an exam room where you may have a mobile laptop that a provider, a nurse, and maybe even a medical assistant share. Maintaining multiple separate sessions on the same machine is covered in a separate video. Now moving down under the banner in the upper left, we have navigation arrows. Now in my example right now, since I have not loaded any pages into my temporary internet cache, they're both grayed out. Because Prognosis operates on an internet cloud-based platform, there is a temporary cache of pages loaded. So as you are using the system, these arrows will become enabled to allow you to go back and forth through the 20 most recent pages accessed. You always have the ability of returning here to the home page by clicking the little house icon. The next feature here next to the house, we have our module tabs. Some people refer to these as menus. All of the functions of these modules or tabs, of course, are covered in separate videos. So we're not going to go into any of the detail here. Pretty self-explanatory. The Appointments tab gives you your scheduling module access. Patient has all of our patient demographics and encounter, as well as the ability of faxing or emailing medical records. We have the ordering module for physician orders. The opportunity of sending messages to one another throughout Prognosis, as well as attaching and scanning. We have different reports available at different levels, and then the configuration menu. And then to the far right of that, we have our system tray of icons. Now, again, this is static throughout the session, so you will always be able to access these system level icons, regardless of what activity is going on down here below. Now, the presence or absence of icons here really depends upon a couple of factors. Some icons are contingent upon the medic type. So for example, this icon here that says billing. For users that have access to both practice management and EMR, this icon will be present. When you're on the billing side, it will actually change to an EMR label so that they can toggle back and forth. Users who do not have access, however, will not see this icon at all. The rest of the icons will just be truncated to the right. To the left of that, we have our meaningful use dashboard. That will only be present if meaningful use is being followed within your practice. So if you have not opted to use the meaningful use module, you won't see this icon at all either. We then have the take appointment icon, which is covered in a separate video, but that is one of the shortcuts for quickly doing a follow-up appointment, like during the checkout process. We have the universal patient search, which is discussed in detail in the patient register video, accessing a patient's chart. We have an alert icon. This will indicate whether there are system messages present or user messages specific to the user. We have access to our Client Resource Center, where you can access videos such as the one you're listening to right now, as well as other written documentation and FAQs. Our system help opens our help topics. This is an alphabetical index of subjects, which includes features, workflows, and technical things such as your internet settings, webinar presentations, and if we click on our V, we have version build release notes. Prognosis info is a summary of system details. Up here in the upper right, we have our meaningful use certification number. And then you have a listing of things such as version and build number, the number of licensed providers in your practice and service pack, your clinic ID, which is useful for technical support. You may be asked that when you're contacting the help desk. It also has information such as whether or not billing has been turned on and other modules and different levels of interfaces. Next is the lock, which allows you to lock your session that you're in. Now, let's say I'm already on an encounter screen and I get called away or it's time for lunch, but I don't want to stop what I'm doing. So I don't want to log out of the system. I would simply lock it for HIPAA's sake. Then when I come back, I want to resume my session. All I have to do is enter my password and it takes me right back to where I was. Whereas the log out icon, which is right beside it, actually exits the system and requires me to log back in completely, including my username and password, and it starts all over with a brand new session, canceling out what I was previously doing. So that covers the basic icons that are either going to be static or not based upon the user and system properties. Now, if you notice right now, I do not see a stethoscope icon up here, but if I go ahead and open up an encounter, for instance, I'll open up Jack's Teller's chart and go back to my home page, and now you'll see that there is a new icon has appeared that is a stethoscope called Current Encounter. Once you have loaded a patient's encounter in memory, the stethoscope appears so that you can always easily navigate back to that patient's chart. That way, if you were in the middle of an encounter and had to toggle into billing or had to do a search for some other reason or create a checkout appointment, and then you wanted to go back to Mr. Teller's chart, you simply click the stethoscope and you can easily go back to where you were. Another navigation tool that you will see starting here on the home page is the question mark. I mentioned up here that we have the system level help, which is at an alphabetical topic level. This is page sensitive help. So since I'm on the home page, the question mark opens up specifically the home page topic. So that is another way of getting some guidance as you are navigating through the system. Now, below the system banner, where we have our user homepage introduction statement, we have a shortcut dashboard to our inbox, which gives us a count of unread as well as urgent or pending items. The number in black representing the number of alerts or messages that have not yet been read, and the number in red in parentheses represents the number of alerts or urgent messages or pending to-do items that still need action. We have the hyperlink to actually open up the entire inbox, so we can then work our messages accordingly. Now, you notice now that I have loaded pages, my arrows are becoming active. We discussed the different homepage links for other user types that I'm not going to go into at this point because they're covered in the different function level videos. But the two tabs down here are Appointment and Open Encounter. These are both tied to the schedule, but they have subtle differences. It will always default to the Appointment tab, no matter what medic type you are when you log in. And it always defaults to the current system date. As we see here, I'm recording this video on Monday, December 15th, 2014. So every user who logs in the system will always get that day's schedule. Now, if you notice to the left of my date, I have a navigation arrow and it took me one day previous, or I have a navigation to the right, which takes me one day forward. I also have a calendar, which allows me to navigate to a completely different month or year. And then I can go back quickly to today's schedule. The schedule is static. Now, on the current day, obviously, it will be changing. You'll notice that we have some appointments here that show scheduled. We have various statuses. Statuses, of course, are covered in different modules of this training library based on the activity of that encounter. And as you're watching this video and listening to me, you may notice this screen is going to periodically blink. That is a 60-second auto refresh. On the current scheduled dates, there is an automatic refresh for a real-time status update. That way, within a 60-second window, when you are viewing your homepage, you always know the activity of that day's schedule. So obviously, on previous days that are no longer being activated, you have a static picture of that schedule. That is on the Appointment tab, which is specific to a date. Further, you have a Filters option. Within this Filters option, then, you can change default parameters. Now, one of the characteristics system-wide in Prognosis is the fact that we have default behaviors and then user behaviors or preferred behaviors. Every default setting can be overridden at a user or a preference level. By default, when you first get Prognosis, before you start customizing them, If you're logged in as a doctor, you will see only your own patients. There is a property, however, that allows a doctor to see other doctors' patients within the practice. And then you will have an option here to choose different providers. You notice here, if I click the box at the title level, it selects all or deselects all, and then I can pick and choose. That again is contingent upon that property allowing it in the first place. Otherwise, you would see only your own. The same is true with nurses and medical assistants and other clinical staff. There's a property that would allow them, if they are assigned, move this window down a little bit. If you remember, when you're logged in as a clinician or a doctor, you have that hyperlink up here that says assign clinical staff or assign providers. By default, they will see only that doctor's appointments. Unless the property is enabled at a system level, then they can choose to view other doctors. Now, once these filters have been set, they are specific to the user's homepage until they're changed again. So it is important if you choose to go with non-default behaviors. And then all of a sudden, it feels like, where's this patient? The patient should be here. They're in the back room being treated. I can't go out there and order my injection because he's not coming up on my schedule, says your nurse. Probably because she has shut off that doctor's patients from her filter. So she would need to come in here and verify she's able to view that doctor's patients. So that is something procedurally you work out as to whether you're going to let them see only patients for whom doctors they're assigned to or all, and then understand how to use these filters accordingly. Same is true with encounter types, appointment statuses, and locations. Now the Open Encounter tab is subtly different because notice here there is no date. There's no calendar. There's no ability of navigating forwards or backwards. This is cumulative. If you notice on the top, it is defaulting to the current date. But down here in the lower right, I have a counter. And if I go to my last page, notice I go all the way back to 2011. Open Encounter is a cumulative list of every encounter that has been opened and not closed. So this actually becomes a work list. Ideally, in a live environment, you should never have encounters open longer than a day or two. Now, of course, that's always going to depend upon local practice, but especially if you're using our practice management module, since closing the encounter automatically creates the claim, and with meaningful use, there are certain requirements that have to be done within 24 hours. It's a good idea that doctors are closing their encounters every day. So ideally, this is going to be a very manageable work list. Now, right above the schedule area, there is another row of icons. Now, I mentioned earlier the system level icons up here at the top, which remain static wherever you are in the system. These icons, however, are patient focused. They are only visible when you're here on the home page, and they are focused to whichever patient you have selected down here in the schedule area. For instance, right now I have Jack's Teller highlighted. So these icons will be in relevance to Jack's Teller. If I choose Olivia Pope, the same icons are available to Olivia Pope. So these are shortcuts for that particular patient. And as with all shortcuts, all of these icons correspond to menu options. For instance, patient register is your demographics. The umbrella is your patient insurance. We have alerts, notes, and so on. So at a home page level, if you want to quickly, for instance, at the front desk, look at the e-signatures or get an e-signature when they're checking in and you don't want to open up the schedule page, you can do that. During checkout, if you want to print your checkout documents, collect the copayment. These are shortcut icons that are also available on the schedule page, but depending upon your role within the office, if you don't usually go to the schedule page, you can also perform those functions from here. It's just with regards to the patient you've chosen. So that's basically the anatomy of your home page with regards to the maneuvering through the different modules or choosing the different levels of shortcuts, whether they're at a system level or at a patient focus level. Now to finish out this video, we're not going to see a lot of screen movement because the functionality is actually demonstrated in the separate feature videos. But we do want to focus on certain navigation standards and some universal behaviors that are system-wide throughout prognosis. For instance, the binoculars. Whether the binocular is green or black, it indicates that there is a search and select. In some cases, it will also allow you to add a new value to a specific master file. Now, you will see this on various screens. So whatever screen the binocular is allowing you to search, The underlying master file would be the one that you're able to update when you also have the add new functionality there. Similarly will be the plus sign. Whenever you have a plus sign available, that's an indication that there's a multiple selection. As you see here off to the right, you're able to search in the title field, and then you can change that search by clicking a checkbox. And usually this type of user interface will allow you to select up to 10 different choices. There are system parameters that drives that in some places at a screen level, but it allows you to change your search and continue to choose without having to reselect the icon. You also will see the add new record, which will allow you to create a new record to the underlying master file, such as on patient register, when you need to create a brand new patient. Another common icon you will see will be the drop-down pick list. And this is indicative of a user-defined group. Now, master files and groups are all user-defined, but they're stored differently under the configuration menu. There's also hyperlinks throughout the system. Now, a hyperlink is represented by blue font that is also underlined. Sometimes it will be the patient name. Other times it may be a function name, such as clinic form, or it may be an order number, such as a laboratory order number, an insurance company name. Whatever the text of the label is, it is going to open up again the underlying value underneath it. Some other consistencies throughout the system is with regards to color coding. This is most prominent on the face sheet. You also see it at other places throughout the encounter documentation, and that is with regards to the yellow and the seafoam green color. Typically, with regards to any level of clinical documentation, the yellow is going to represent historical data that is being carried forward from a previous visit, and the seafoam green is indicative of information that was entered as of that particular encounter. And another commonality throughout prognosis is the grid display of details. And this is also throughout the system on many screens. You will see it at the insurance level, the prescription level, the laboratory and radiology level, and numerous other places. Most prominently, we've already seen it on our homepage. Wherever there is a list of details, it is presented in a grid format or a table, and it's in alternating gray lines when the data is not in focus. The focus is indicated by the blue highlight, and as your cursor is moved to a different line, regardless of what the original gray shading is in the background, it will become blue or aqua to indicate that is active or patient focused. And then especially in those screens where we have patient focused icons, they're going to be relevant to the patient that has been chosen, or the lab order, or the drug on the prescription screen that is in focus. And then the most important note of all I'd like to stress is with regards to navigating through prognosis. Browser settings are defined on an individual PC level. There are separate videos here on our Resource Center specific to your browser, whether that is Microsoft Internet Explorer, and then of course there are version numbers. Most currently on the market as of December 2014 is Internet version 10, Internet version 11. There are still many users of Internet 9 and 8. There's also Safari for those of you who use Mac and iPad. There's Google Chrome and so on. Whatever browser you are utilizing to navigate the internet, there are specific settings that allow prognosis to operate correctly. Sometimes, based upon your internal IT infrastructure, if you have automatic updates enabled, these can affect your browser settings. And again, browser settings are individualized, so it may not impact every user in your practice at the same time. So it is extremely important that you understand this. And that is why, as we pointed out in our initially logging in and accessing prognosis video, one of the icons on your login screen is a shortcut to browser settings, so that whenever there has been a change or your prognosis navigation seems to be impacted negatively, you're able to restore those settings correctly. So in review of our home page and navigating EMR, we discussed our navigation arrows in our home icon in the upper left. We have system tabs, which some folks refer to as modules or menus. There are also shortcut icons. Predominantly in the upper right, we have our system tray icons, which could be either static based upon your user profile medic type or based upon various levels of system or user activity. There's also then patient-focused icons lower down the page that is relevant to the specifically selected patient on the schedule. You have homepage tabs, which are governed by various homepage properties and filters set by the user. And then finally, we discuss some universal navigation rules and behaviors, such as color coding, your search and select options, various icons, master files, and group lists, as well as behaviors that are determined either at a system level through some administrative properties, or those that can be overridden at a user preference level. And of course, those are covered in more in-depth and individual functional videos. That concludes this video within the series. Please click the appropriate link below for your next step. If you'd like to take a quiz, you will receive your results in real time directly on the screen so that you can see how well you've done. If you answer incorrectly, the system will prompt you with the correct response. In addition, a confidential email will be sent to the education team to help us better serve you with our educational offerings. Second, advance to the next video within the series you're currently in. And finally, return to the video library main page. As always, feel free to contact us through the Resource Center or email with any additional questions or comments.